It is now time for Man Alone to play Pendragon. Some say that Man Alone is King Arthur reborn, others say he's the Burger King reborn. I just call him old dad, he's my father, he's the father to all of us. He is King Arthur reborn and he's our father. Enjoy the show.
Very nice. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is episode 3 of the Man Alone Penta 5-year Pendragon campaign, affectionately known the world over as Pentadragon. And let's really take back the connotation with penta. You know, the pentagram has really done a number on that prefix. And we need to think of things like the Pentagon. That's not that. Anyways, this one's called Pentadragon. And on our last episode, we finished up book 1, which was Ye Classic Adventure in the Sword and the Stone. We learned a little something about combat. We learned a little something about dice rolls. We learned about dice checks and how dice checks are not anything other than just checking off a box next to the dice, which is something that we need to consistently remind ourselves of as we play through the game. This right here, where we are in, is known as the soloRPG Dead Zone. We have completed character creation. Now, we haven't actually created the character for the campaign, the long-term campaign, or at least the first character for that campaign. But it might be influenced by the character we had. We had a Jorma, which, my other character will be named Jorma, but that's all my characters are named Jorma, so that doesn't mean anything. But we're in the danger zone because this is the point where the enthusiasm of starting something and the idea of starting something it's here, right? It's no longer this nebulous future with endless possibility. We are now creating those possibilities. And creating those possibilities does not always feel as easy and as liberating as that first part where your adventure could go anywhere. But here's what happens if you get stuck in the dead zone. And it is not just this episode. This episode is probably part of the dead zone. But it'll go on, right? It'll get a little bit better. It'll ebb and flow. But it's important that we persevere through this, because beyond the dead zone, beyond the valley, is where we're going to have extremely satisfying, extremely, I use the word generative a lot. I just think it generates a lot of stuff that is the real cosa, the real thing that we're after right now. And so we're going to push through this as best as we can. It's going to be a little weird, right? Because this is the adolescence of the campaign's growth into adulthood here. Not my actual character, but the actual campaign, because we did the tutorial, right? We did the intro quest as best we could, and we had some fun. And now we know how some of it looks, but there's a lot still yet to fill in. And so there's no clear road from here to the start of the campaign. And we don't want to get slowed down by that, because I really wanted to make the highlight of this campaign to be the play, right? And so as much as I can, I would like to do a learning of mechanics and stuff outside of the play. And then when I come back, I will be able to just zoom right into it, right? The issue here is that part of learning, especially at this stage, is going to actually be putting the rubber to the road. And so we're going to go through book 2 as much as we can. And I have done a little bit of work in between sessions. And I said that like at the beginning of the sessions, I'll try to give an in-between report. So this is Once and Future King by T.H. White. Somebody asked me in the Man Alone Discord what were some good like texts for this. And so Once and Future King, that's obviously one of the greats. Le Mort d'Arthur, which is, you know, the OG. And somebody also recommended The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman, which I read the sample so far and I have it on the way. That's a more modern take, but it seems really cool. Like, unfortunately, the cover for it, I've saw it before, and for whatever reason, the cover for it just did not look like a serious book. And I don't know if I just missaw it or whatever, but that is all part of the work that needs to happen in the background of me sort of filling up my head with data, because that's going to be really important for creating the raw materials from which I'll be able to like alchemize into new things, new ideas. And let's see, Mort d'Arthur, Once and Future King, Bright Sword. BB and I also sat and watched one of the all-time greats. It is both totally camp and cheesy and also totally awesome and metal. The movie Excalibur from 1981, which is completely puzzling. It has some of the most awesome scenes of like dudes getting run through with lances. And then it has these fight scenes that I'm not even kidding. They're like, these are, and this is no like low budget movie. I mean, it has Liam Neeson, Gabriel Byrne, Patrick Stewart, Helen Mirren. And in the opening fight, there's guys like there's literally like that kind of sword fighting. But it's just really cool, and it's got a lot of choices have to be made when you're making Arthurian legend, you know, novels, movies, whatever, because there's just so many versions and there's conflicting histories and there's like what part of the story do you pay attention to, et cetera, et cetera. And so some of that, installing some of that into my head. And then also I have been going through book 2, and I have notes just on some of the basic mechanics. Writing down these things helps me to remember. I'll probably never reference it outside of this video right now, but the actual act of writing it is like a second way that I commit it to memory. I've also put together a folder on CryptPad, which all of you should have access to. And that folder has a lot of the resources I've been accruing. So I've both been accruing different solo resources. Not only a few of them are specifically like solo tools, but some of the other things that you'll find in there. This one I think was really, really cool. This is just kind of a timeline from 402 up to 597. This is the Arthurian family tree, and I've been poring over this. There was a book when I was a kid that I checked out from my library all the time, and I'm not sure how to say it, but it was Greek or Roman mythology with these beautiful pictures, and the author was spelled like that. There was one for Norse mythology too, and for whatever reason, there was a family tree in there with all like the, you know, the Olympic gods, and it was just so cool. Like, for whatever reason, this really gets me into a story, just the multi-generational aspect of it, the different factions that form, the crossovers. And as I was watching Excalibur, I was really having some really intriguing thoughts about, because whenever you have a story that's this old and this persistent, what I find over time is that the characters in that story obviously represent more than the characters. And so I've just been thinking a lot about Merlin, and also the fact that like Arthur was born of perfidy, of lies, of manipulation. Uther wanted Igraine, who was the Duke of Cornwall's wife, and he sort of was so overcome with desire for her that he made a pact with Merlin to say, if you can give me a night with this woman, I will, I'll and make me king. I mean, Merlin made him king, but it was a very clear example of like it wasn't the right generation. So Merlin, because he was kind of a hothead, Uther Pendragon, and so Merlin's like, all right, I'll give this to you, but what you got to do is you have to give me the boy. And so Uther agrees, and he makes Uther look like Gorlois, Duke of Tintagel. He was just called Cornwall in the movie. He makes him look like him as he's going out and hunting after Uther, and so he gets killed right as Uther, who is disguised as Igraine's husband, sleeps with her, and from that is born Arthur. And I thought that's so interesting that this very moral, very ideal character who represents equality and represents bravery and moral courage was born of, an assault, a lie, a manipulation. And I think it touches on one of the themes that I find not just in literature, but in so many things, which is that like sometimes to get a good ending, there has to be bad things that happen before it. And in fact, sometimes when you try to do the right thing, I mean, this is very basic, it's not mind-blowing here, but sometimes you try to do the right thing all along the way and the wrong outcome happens. And then also sometimes you have to do like, I guess you don't have to, but it seems that sometimes to get to the good place in the world, you have to go through the bad places first. Like you have to get low just to get through, as they say. And I think in that way, Arthur represents the hopefulness, the positivity that can come from the actions of wretched people. I mean, Uther was wretched. He was low. And to me, that's part of what might be so inspiring about this is like you basically have this unclaimed child, a weird sort of bastard who was, was just worthy. He was just worthy of the sword Excalibur. And then Merlin as well. These are just where some of my thoughts are on it right now. I just think Merlin is like obviously the conflict between the kind of druidic magic of the British Isles, what was there beforehand, and the civilizational aspects, and how it almost took, again, the combination of that and the Roman Empire coming together to release the full power of what became, for a long time, the British Empire, the most powerful empire in the world. And the tension between that, the tension between the wildness, the magic of the untamed, and then versus the civilizational aspects, which I think that comes up over and over with like Lancelot and Returns to Nature. And anyways, I'm sure we'll talk more about this as we go through it, but this is in the folder. This is probably going to be, I imagine, the most important one I have, which is an NPC generator where as you go through it like you could look at the time period and then you look where they're from and then their homeland within, this has to be Lagros, I think. And then more homeland tables, homelands, more homelands. So if it's French subtable, Gaul subtable, and then generating stats, male characters, female characters, derived stats, cultural stats, distinctive features, cultural traits, generating passions, regional directed traits, trait and passion modifiers, regional passions, father's class, religious virtues, causes of family members' deaths, beginning skill values. So cool. And the skills here, there's a whole lot. So I think this one was like made for 5th edition, and until the next 6th edition GM guide comes out, which should hopefully be in, some people were saying late 2024, but it looks like it's probably going to be early 2025. We'll just kind of piece it together and do the best we have with the resources we have. And right now, looking at this, I feel a bit overwhelmed by it because it's just so many customization options. But as I'm reading through the book more and more, I'm seeing that like it's kind of a front-loaded game with a lot of things where you have to go through quite a few steps to get to the person or the place that you're going to play in. But then once you have those things, the actual system is quite intuitive. There are a lot of options, and probably for the first year, I'm going to have to keep referring back to the book. But I think at one point, I'll probably be able to play off of this sheet, which is truly it's from Green Knight Publishing. This is 3 pages, and it's pretty comprehensive. Now, it's going to maybe be missing things about skirmish battles and horseback and the feasts and everything, but those I would say are the exceptions rather than the rule. I do want to bring up this other website here actually, because I think it is an amazing source, and I'll obviously link it, but just so that you sort of believe me, I want to bring that up just to show you this. Yeah, so this is, again, I'll link it below, but it's scruffygrognard.com. And, this is like one of these pages that you could tell everything here is very hard won. Most of this stuff I got from here. I also got some resources from Paper Dice Games, which is another person who has some really cool resources available for there's some playthrough videos as well as let me just bring up the so that's the YouTube handle, Paper Dice Games 6585. As far as I could see, they have like 3 Pendragon specific games, but they've been playing campaign for a long time, and he's like also has, I think, a Substack or something that has info, and so I did pull some of that from there. But yeah, give that a watch and a follow. I would love to keep seeing more videos, or maybe I'm just not seeing it, but I looked at the Pendragon playlist and it was only about 3 videos. So this is game aids, which, there's more here than even I printed out. And then game forms from 4th and 5th edition, but some like group sheets, some different things for the coat of arms, maps, some really good maps on here. And they actually look better when you click through on them. Arthur's lineage, that's what I got. This is Artorius, Ambrosius Arthur. This is all about like historical evidence. So even if you didn't have like the books, you can still, drum up a lot of the background. And I know that that's a big concern for people, is like, oh, what if I don't know all of the Arthurian legend and stuff like that? Well, nobody, like, there are very few people that know everything there is to know about it, with what's left. And so for me, it's kind of like, I'll just learn what I can and incorporate what I can and make up stuff that seems cool as long as it stays within the same vibe. And then I'll just keep learning. And I know that a great source of that is going to be people in the comments, because it's very rare that one human can know, all that there is. It's usually a collective of people. And so YouTube presents a great opportunity for that. These on the bottom are other pages here, but yeah, so early British kingdoms, Joffrey of Monmouth, British place names, the Round Table Knights. That was really interesting to me because there are a lot of the most famous ones have a real question mark next to them. Sir Tristram, Lancelot, Mordred. Um, this was like the Reservoir Dogs phase, I guess, where it's just White Knight, Mr. Pink, Mr. Gray. And then, yeah, this How to Play Pendragon, that came from there. The Great Pendragon Campaign Index, if you do have the Great Pendragon Campaign, which the physical copy is coming soon for me, the PDF copy is available on drive-thru. Apparently there's no index, and so this, I'm sure, will be extremely helpful once I start utilizing that. And I think probably as I'm developing more and more ideas of how we're going to go about playing this, I think that, unless there's some extremely innovative concept that comes through with the other part of 6th edition, we'll probably use that just to put the backdrop of like what's going on in the kingdom. Yeah, so this is the Round Table Knights. This is, I think this was something that I might have got directed to or made by Paper Dice Games. I'm not quite sure, but this is like the table makes you want to go scream, but actually it's pretty brilliant. So there's summers and winters, and there's winter solo things. Now, I think when some people see that, they jump for joy and they're like, oh gosh, this has like it already has a bunch of solo events. My impression, and you can correct me again if I'm wrong, but my impression is that that's more if you miss a session, you'll kind of try to use these solo shells to make up, to sort of approximate like increases in stats and stuff like that, and wealth and things, just so that you're on par with the other players. And really what it is, if you've ever played like a sports game on PlayStation or N64 or whatever, I don't know why I'm mentioning two systems from when I was 15, but like you can play each game in a season, or you can like simulate it and it'll say, oh, this many hits, this many walks, this many base on bats, whatever. This is more like that. Like it just kind of simulates some different events and outcomes. So we'll see how that can be helpful. And then there are yearly events, which I think actually are going to be really, really useful. So you have like good fortune, and you roll 1d20 for that. And then you got a gift of chainmail. And then you have saga events and enemies. Is it a romantic rival? Enemy status and power. Where are they? Who's angry? How angry? Bad fortune chart. Wooing, courting, deeds, proposals, etc. And so I think as I understand things more, that will make more sense to me. And then this is the workflow document that was shared by Paper Dice Games, which is his his workflow for how he conducts like the solo session. And I can see that I'm probably going to I just have a different style of solo play with some of this stuff. I know that Pendragon is not open world, it's not sandboxy, but I do think that I've been having a hard time trying to figure out how to say this, but I think some solo players and Paper Dice Games, the way that he describes it seems to be this way, is like some solo players want to know what has happened, and I want to know what is happening. And that's, if that doesn't make sense, it looks like rather than saying, okay, I'm standing in the court, there's, the Duchess is making eyes at me, and I am nervous but excited because this is going to be the battle where I make my name. There's another way of doing that, which is like, okay, you flirted with somebody at court, and then you got in trouble with the Duke, and then you lost one horse. And I don't mean to minimize the type of solo play that he does, nor do I know if I'm accurate, right? I just have small glimpses into it. But I want to see through my mind's eye what's happening, and I want to make choices within what I'm seeing in that eye. And so undoubtedly this stuff is going to be pretty awesome, and for sure, like these are battle steps. That's going to be huge because that is definitely like in person and focus. Skirmish rules. I'm very intimidated by skirmish combat in games. Even as a GM, I stay away from that because it stresses me out. I'm never quite sure how to do it. Feasts. I do have the Book of Feasts coming and the cards that come with that. I think that's going to be awesome. Getting married, hosting a wedding, knighting, healing, hunting, inspiration, tournaments, lance charges, ranged combat, anarchy period, winter phase, synopsis. And yeah, I guess this is where I found the other resources here is that scruffygrognard.com/Pendragon. So lots of resources at my disposal. And the last thing that I'll do before I start charging ahead here is just talk about some of the major points that I wrote down as I was going through the rules, because as this is most definitely, it's got some flavor here, but it's most definitely a rule book or explaining the rules. And so I think that our time would be better spent for me mostly knowing the rules so I can play, explaining some of the rules, and then I don't know any other way to say this other than like I'm going to be learning the rules in front of you. And so again, could use help in the comments, could use your impressions of that. It might take me a couple times to get some things right, etc. So we will see. Oh, and if you're curious about this, these do come in the starter kit. I don't love these. They're very flimsy and they're perforated. I would have loved a nice deck of like standard, even 52 playing cards. But they have a lot of good info and the layout on them is really nice. And these look basically like mostly these are characters or some sort of battles. Like Breton mercenary knights, Pictish javeliners, Cambrian archers, knights of Gore. And so how we use these we'll find out, but it's really reassuring to start to like know what the stuff means in these columns, because it's almost like when you learn to read, I have a very, very distinct memory of looking at a sign by the house I grew up at. It was down the street. There was a laundromat, or it was like a dry cleaning. And I remember I was walking and I was looking at this sign and I knew what the place was. I knew it was a dry cleaner, but I didn't know how to read yet. I was too little. I was like 3. And I remember being like, gosh, like I want to read that. Like I knew the letters, I knew some of the letters, but I didn't know how to read yet. And then every time I'd pass that, even like a couple weeks ago, I passed it because I was visiting some family, and I look at that sign and I'm like, I can't ever see that sign the way I saw it before I knew how to read. Like you can't look at the word cleaner and not see cleaner anymore. It's now a word. And I feel like as I learn how to solo a game, I start to like see this stuff in a way that it's no longer confusing for me and I can't see it any other way. Side note, and I did upload this, but into the folder, as I'm going through stuff, I'm also trying to put together solo play rules for myself. This is I'm just putting stuff down. I don't even know if this stuff works yet, but I'm actively adding it, changing it. I came up with some kingdom statuses, event descriptions. A group of rebels seeks refuge in your lands. I don't know if that works. I don't know if that'll fit in to Pendragon, but I just wanted to generate some things to get the ball rolling. And then I made this table of like trait tests. I think this could be something I want to do, like rather than saying you have this conflict, which is like in group play, you'd say, oh, there's this conflict. What traits do you want to test here? Or what trait is applicable here? Instead, I want to say, these are the traits, and you now have to create a scene that, you know, brings those traits into conflict. Situation generator. I'm starting to list out like combat, physical, or social challenges seem like combat to me. I might be long. And then I'm trying to build out a session log template as well as like quest progression. So I'll keep adding to it. I'll keep it available for everybody. But yeah, so far, I mean, it's, if you look at it, please don't expect it. Don't be like, oh, this is totally wrong. What it, like, I know I'm figuring it out. So, okay. So I think we're done with the adventure of the sword tournament, right? That was what was actually in book. Was that book 1 or is that book 3? Well, either way, I don't need to have this up right now. Okay. So I'm just going to adjust the lighting. All right. And so if you weren't like a fan of this game before this video, or until, sorry, the video glitched a little bit. If you weren't like following this before when this was coming out, the Pendragon 6th edition, the starter set came out, and that was all that was out for a while. And again, I do believe Greg Stafford was working on this when he died. And then the core rulebook came out maybe 6 months later. I could be wrong. But very quickly, the people who have been playing Pendragon for a long time were like, this is an incomplete rulebook. At first, I didn't understand what they meant. It was 250 pages, but now I'm understanding more and more the many options that are missing. The plan, again, is that second part is kind of missing the GM guide. And so that part is coming. But for a while, this was all there was. And I have to say, for a starter kit, this is quite comprehensive. There's just like a lot of stuff here. And because I am wanting to do my best, like besides making this video series, I want to try to get good at this. It's my own personal challenge. I want to play against my own type, which is to sort of, I'm not detail oriented. I can improvise. I want to challenge myself to approach this a little differently and see how it feels. And so usually I would kind of skim through things like this and come back as needed. But I read all of this, and this is in a way, I'm already glad I did this, because this has so much knowledge packed in such a small space about how the society runs at that time. And everything was ordered. It is, from our standards, absurd. Like, it is absurd. You want to say, why don't you understand the predicament you're in? Why are you like making the choices you're making when you can easily make a different choice, right? But then it does me well to remember that people in 5492 AD are going to say that about me. They're like, why did these people why did they like, I don't know. I think about like surgeries or injections, and they'll be like, yeah, a long time ago, when people were sick, they'd actually stab them. Do you believe that? They weren't able to just like scan the medicine into them. And here, just knowing the hierarchy from the king, and the king, everything flows forth from the king, which is, the only one above the king is God. And how convenient too, because God is like never physically there to like hold the king accountable. So the king is almost like the representative. Even in a pagan culture, there is this sort of stairway that leads up to a singular divine authority. And that's what everybody expected and what everybody needed to make them feel safe. There was no conception of social, what do they call that? Like social mobility, unless you were in this sort of knight class, which knights were pretty much like the lowest of the non-peasant class. And there was like, you can be a banneret, which is a sort of high-ranking knight. There's barons, and then knights kind of have their own little hierarchy with like squires and pages. But the peasants, essentially, it's just like they were just born that way. Like, and that's how they would see it. It's like, oh, I was born a peasant, and so that's my lot, and that's it. I think for most of you, this will be like, yeah, pretty obvious, but I just think it tingles me to think about this, like this idea of a society organized in such a way that even though it's preposterous in a lot of ways, even though it's obscene, even though it's dehumanizing, there is still the same thing that exists today, which is that people will organize themselves in any way in which the person will turn over their autonomy for safety. And if you ever read Hobbes and Leviathan, this is like how the state always works in a way, but it was so immediately apparent in feudalistic society. But there also is this like really, it's not touching, it's not beautiful, it's not anything. It's just kind of like, if you were the knight that ensured the productivity of the peasants who were under you, you never did any work. And if you did any work, if you were like, well, they're really slacking, I'm going to go out there with a plow, you would dishonor yourself. You would like become a laughing stock. You would be disrespected, because what that would mean is you are not a good enough leader or inspiring enough to get them to do it themselves. And when I say they traded their freedom for security, in some ways, especially coming from an American ethos, that can feel very pathetic. But as far as what is presented here, and remember, this is a mixture of history and fantasy, but essentially, like, the knights took that very seriously, and they would potentially die to protect their peasants, like whoever, and it wasn't necessarily theirs, but it kind of like went up through the chain of command. Also interesting, knights were only required to be like in the role of a knight for 40 days a year. I'm sure that they could do some overtime if, like, there was a siege or something, but it was just 40 days a year. Okay. Ambulance went by. All right. So, I wanted to, all of this is going to come into play, all of this fiction as we play. I want to mention just a couple of things that stood out to me, that I didn't know, or I didn't know enough about it. So the first thing is the responsibilities of the knight. And I really like this. It's auxilium, concilium, and aids. So auxilium, which is interesting in Spanish, when you really need help, like you don't say ayúdame, you say auxilio. At least where I lived in Nicaragua, they would say auxilio. And so that is like coming to the aid of your liege lord. Concilium means the knight has to serve their lord. And so this could literally be like consultation, or like advice, or serving as a transporter, guarding them. And sometimes, and I don't really fully understand this, but it says you can stand in as a hostage for the Lord, which I really like. It's like, I've taken the Lord hostage, and it's like, hey, I'm here to be the hostage. Tag me out. I'm here, in the evening shift. Or providing the liege lord's children training as squires in their court. And then the third responsibility, aids, covers their financial obligations. They have to, first of all, knight the Lord's firstborn. They have to help pay for the Lord's marriage. And this is my favorite one, again, having to do with ransom. If the Lord gets captured, they have to get together and be like, all right, we got to, pay for the ransom here. This paragraph was also interesting. Knights are not entirely free. They must conform to custom and law. Most importantly, every knight is honor bound to obey their liege, a higher-ranking lord who interprets that custom and law for their underlings. To disobey one's lord is to destroy a knight's honor. To speak back to the lord is dangerous, even if they have ordered a heinous crime to be committed. A knight's primary duty is to faultlessly obey their lord, even superseding the protection of the weak. At the start of Arthur's reign, wicked lords and their duty-bound knights do much evil across the land. The boy king begins changing this dynamic by introducing chivalry. So, chivalry is, in a weird way, this sort of social technology that it is, in a way, absurd, adventitious, unnecessary in a lot of ways. But what it does is it signals that this knight is conforming to a code of behavior, even when there are consequences to doing that, even when it does not necessarily help them, and even when their lord is not looking. And what that does is it begins to establish a sort of trust in the behavior of knights, right? And when you have that, that's how, if Arthur or Ambrosius or whatever probably existed in some form, or was the, combined story of several kings or whatever, this probably was what helped to consolidate the rule, because it's, when you have these untamed lands where there's no clear leader, to have somebody who creates a reliable coda, no matter how arbitrary it may be, it allows people to feel that consistent, reliable presence of power. It's a section on female knights. I'm not going to be part of that conversation. We are going to go with the Manalone, what Manalone imagined when he was 4 years old. And so Manalone imagined himself as a knight. Manalone is a boy. I don't have any issues with female knights in a fantasy game. I am likely not going to include them because that is not native to my childhood imaginings about this. I will, if there's something that comes up that indicates that there could be a good narrative arc to it. I guess the only thing I will say is I really look forward to the day when we don't have a section called Female Knights. I look forward to the day when it just says your knight can be whoever they want. I see a very low level of, I do not understand why they would go out of their way to make a whole section about this and then also say there is about 1 in 20 knights are women. Okay. So if there's like an equality between male and female knights, why then would there be 1 in 20 that are women? Why wouldn't it be 1 in 2? So pretty unnecessary section, if you ask me. She looks fine in some armor. I think it probably caused some complications regarding their rules around legacy and family and courtship and stuff. But I think if one was so motivated to make that work, they could easily do it. So if you would like to play a female knight, if you want to play A knight that is a gelatinous cube. Go ahead, because in the palace inside your mind, you're the King Arthur at all times. Okay. The daily life was extremely interesting. I really liked that when the knights woke up, they put like mattress or tabletops over all their mattresses and just ate off that. And there was a midday, there was a light meal. I think that I always think historically about like when were the meals. That's all I want to know. How often was I able to eat a meal? Okay. We do not have to go over dice rolls except to say that there's pretty much 3 rolls we're going to have. 1d20, xd6, and then 1d3s, which you can use just a 1d6, 1 to 2 being 1, 3 to 4, or you could be extremely wealthy like me and be able to afford this $9,000 D3 die that only has 1, 2, 3, but dream on. Slightly important, just to clarify, statistics is the catch-all. Stats include traits, passions, characteristics, skills, glory, and armor. Parry, shield protection. Values are the number of the stat, and they're always stated as like sword 15, valorous 12, etc. And for traits, there's always going to be a sum of 20. And so there is like the bigger one gets, the more another one shrinks, and vice versa. It's kind of like a balloon animal. Squeeze one side, the other side gets bigger. And then rolls and checks. Again, when you're rolling, you're going to try to roll under. And when you're checking, you are literally checking off the box to say that you have earned an experience check in there. There are generally 4 things in group play that you get a check for. You get a check for a crit success, which means you rolled exactly what the number is. So like if you're trying to roll under 16, that's a success. If you roll over 16, it's a fail. If you roll 20, it's a bad fail, a fumble. But if you roll exactly 16, that's a critical success, and you get a check for a crit success. You do whatever you're trying to do very well. You hit a 20, a fumble. You also get an experience check for that, because the idea is like you learned a lot through messing up this badly. You can also get a check when you like overcome terrible, when you come from behind or against the odds, and you perform well in the face of adversity. And you can also do one when you do something creative or inventive. And I think that is, for me, this seems to be the real joy of this game. Like, speaking of meals, I have been fixated on the idea of GMing this game in a group play at some point in my life. And every time there's a feast, I want there to be an actual feast that I'm like serving. And so if my character writes a poem, I want to write a poem. If my character does a painting, I want to make a painting, maybe not a full painting, but at least draw something. And so when I would do that, I would give myself a check for that. And then we'll talk about how the experience progression goes. Most things a character does are automatically successful, but when there's ambiguity, we roll. Unopposed resolution is when we test our abilities just against the ability and not anyone else or any fixed number. And so it's like if there was somebody spying on you from the rafters, you would roll awareness 12. And so you'd be trying to roll under 12, 19, fail. That's that. Again, crit success is when you roll exactly what you're looking for or exactly the value of the stat. They do clarify that a fumble is not always like a catastrophe. And I think that some of that logic can be borrowed for any Powered by the Apocalypse game. Like, we don't need to make every fumble into like, oh, everything your character wanted and was trying failed and they totally messed up and now they have to do something else. It can also be like embarrassing. It mentions here that you're trying to write a romantic ballad and you start coughing. And I'm going to lean on that. Sometimes it's going to be a vexation or a loss of what I was trying to get, but sometimes it could just be like narratively something that is uniquely narratively unfortunate, right? Without like dropping the whole arc of what we were trying to do. Opposed resolution, same thing. This is a little bit, this took me a second to figure out, so I do want to explain it. All right, so you have unopposed where you're just rolling against the stat, but say that there's two characters and I have a, let's just use the stats it offers here. I have a sword my sword skill is 15. And find some other robber who has a sword of 12. Okay. So the robber rolls a 13 and his sword was 12. So he fails. And then I roll a 1. I'm the winner. Okay. But then I roll a 12, which I was trying to get under a 15. And so I succeed. And then the robber rolls an 11. They also succeeded. Okay. So they rolled an 11 and they were trying to get under 12. And I rolled a 12 and I was trying to get under 15. So now if you're following along and this is your first time learning this, I want you to guess who wins here. Well, we both succeeded, but the robber has a partial success. And so his shield might protect him. In the case of like getting hit, he might get a little bit higher protection because Sir Clarion's roll is higher. And so even the fact that my sword level is 15, that just means that regardless of the dice values, I have more room to be successful and I have more room to be more successful. A critical success beats any other outcome in an opposed resolution and guarantees a win or at least a tie because all critical successes are equal and all of them are greater than a simple success. So the worst thing that can happen when you roll a crit success is somebody else rolls a crit success. It doesn't matter if I roll a crit success of 14 and somebody else has a sword value of 5 and they roll a 5. It like erase those numbers from your mind as soon as you get a crit. They're both just critical successes and they are equal. If both sides are successful, critical, or otherwise, it's impossible to determine a winner. If both fail, each suffers negative consequences. In any case, the opponents may roll again next round or choose other actions. A tie result is also a success in combat that both combatants strike with some special applications and exception. We'll get to that in combat. And then modifiers, a bonus adjusts the value up, a penalty brings it down. Modifiers are always like they can be given to players. If you have a GM, they can be requested by them depending on the situation. We'll have to figure out a reliable way or at least an approximated way to do that in solo play. And they're always added or subtracted from the stat value, not from the roll. The exception to that is for crit bonus. We'll talk about that. There's trait and passion modifiers. For instance, it gives the example of a character who has not eaten in days may get a -10 modifier to temperate when presented a tempting morsel from a strange witch in the woods. And that just makes sense. That shifts the odds because of the circumstance. Characteristics can get modifiers. Usually those are penalties. Damage modifiers we'll talk about in arms and armor. And skill modifiers to make an action harder or easier. Very similar to how most of these games do it. I do want to... Let's see. Okay. I want to explain one thing that I was a little confused on, but I'm going to take a second to read it over so that I don't further confuse you. Okay, I am very glad that I took the time to do that because I would have told you something wrong. Okay, so I wanted to review the 4 types of roles because I think that if you sort of hand wave this and don't get it down, I think a lot of things afterwards are going to be kind of difficult to understand. All right, so we have the value that we're trying to hit. And in an unopposed role, say I have 12 awareness. I know for some of you who are experienced, it's going to be tedious, but for new players, this seems to me to be a very important thing. So, do you notice somebody spying on you? We roll for awareness. If we have a roll of 6, then we have succeeded. And if we have a roll of 14, we have failed. Okay. If we have rolled a 20, we have really failed. We've fumbled. And if we roll exactly a 12, we have a crit success. So unopposed rolls, that's pretty simple. But in opposed rolls, you're having 2 people that are rolling at the same time. And it doesn't necessarily have, it could be you and an NPC or an adversary. But we're going to say, to use the example, let's not even use sword because I don't want to think of this just in combat. Say, what's a good skill that can apply to like quickness here? Falconry. Okay, orate. Okay, so you have to give, 2 people have to give speeches in an attempt to impress the court for some reason. And I have an orate of 7. And my opposed role, the person Sir Cedric, has an orate of 9. All right. And we'll use this for like, this is me and this is Cedric. So if I roll under a 7, then I have a success. And if Sir Cedric rolls under a 9, Sir Cedric has a success. And so the question is, we both have successes here. Who wins? Well, the question is, who rolled higher but still under their number? Okay? So it's almost like a Price is Right bid. You have to go as close to the value as possible without going over. And so even though I have a skill of 7, if I rolled a 6 and Sir Cedric rolled a 3, I win. But Sir Cedric didn't lose because Sir Cedric did what he needed to do, which was roll under a 9. So is a partial success. Okay. Even though, and I think, at least for me, this was a little bit confusing, right? Because normally it only runs in one direction. Like you're trying to get the dice as low as you can or as high as you can. But this only applies to one side of it in Pendragon. If you have a skill of 15, you either want to roll under 15, but if you don't, well, then you at least want to roll under 20 because 20 is a fumble. But using that logic, and this is what happens to me sometimes, I would say, okay, well, if 20 is the worst outcome, then the best outcome has to be 1. But that's not it. The best outcome is actually 15 itself. And so this is where my mind would get a little jumbled because I was like, okay, if I'm trying to roll under a 15 and another person's trying to roll under a 15, I'm trying to roll under. So I'd be like, well, lower numbers are better. So if I rolled a 3 and somebody else rolled a 5, then I must be the winner because it's closer, it's lower. But as soon as you get under the number, under the threshold you're trying to roll under, you're then competing back towards that number. Okay, so if you go over, you suck, you lost, you're out. But if you go under, you want as high or as close to the target number that you're trying to roll against without going over, or you want exactly that. And what I was trying to say before about having a higher stat means if my opponent has a stat of 4 and I have the same stat of 11, when I am rolling under, right, their chances to roll under are 1, 2, 3, or they can get a crit success at 4. Whereas my chance to roll under is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or a crit success at 11. But as long as I'm under 11, I want to get as high as I can, up to and including 11. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more chances to do that. Except, and I know it's okay if this loses you right now, it's okay. Unless Sir Cedric rolls a crit, because once a crit happens, this number goes away and you should just see a trophy. And there's only one crit trophy. All right, in all the game, there's not any better or bigger crit trophies. There's just one. And if you rolled that too, you'd also get the crit trophy. And the crit trophy beats any number. It beats everything except the crit trophy. So if he rolls a crit with a 4 and I roll a 10, even though I've rolled higher and successful, the crit trophy wins. Okay, so the only thing I can do here is hope to tie. But if you got a 3 and I got a 4, even though he's closer to his crit, doesn't matter. I got higher. Okay? I hope that made sense. If it didn't, it's once it kind of clicks for you, it's not so hard. And I know some of you are like, duh, move on. But some people really have trouble like with number lines. They do. I have some trouble just it would be easier for me to do derivatives than it would be sometimes for me to imagine like number lines and relative position. I don't know why. It's just like my unique form of dyscalculia. Okay. I don't have dyscalculia. I'm saying my general form of what I have trouble with mathematically. Now, values greater than 20, no stat value is going to be higher than 20. However, sometimes a modifier can bring it over 20. Any points in excess of 20 become a crit bonus, which is like shown as in parentheses plus X with the X value added to the result of any relevant die roll. A modified die roll equaling or exceeding 20 counts as a critical success. For instance, a knight with a sword of 20 plus 4 has plus 4 critical bonus. If the player rolls a 16, the final result is modified as 16 plus 4 equals 20, a crit success. Thus, the critical bonus increases the probability of rolling a critical success, since in the case above, the knight would score a critical on any roll for that skill that is greater than or equal to 16. Okay, so that's only if you have a plus modifier that puts you in excess of 20. And remember I said earlier that the crit is one of the only places where the die roll or the modifier acts differently? Let me read you this paragraph. A critical success or critical is when a die roll exactly matches the statistic value. We know that. Now, a roll of 17 for a character with a charge of 17, charge being the skill, is a critical success. And remember, we get that trophy. The character has achieved the ultimate success with a critical and usually gets some added benefits. Always compare the roll against the final modified value of the statistic. A skill with a value of 6, for example, receives a +5 modifier for a final value of 11. A die result of 11 is now what scores a crit, while a regular result of 6, normally a crit, is a regular success. Okay, and so that is, I think, a little bit unique how the crit is calculated, but other than that, I think over time, when you install this software in your head, it's going to make sense, because it does make sense. That's the best part of a system like this. It actually does make sense. And so you don't have to worry about making it make sense, because it's logical. And even here, so now we could better understand this. Bonuses and penalties are always added or subtracted from the statistic value. The only time a resolution die roll is modified is when a critical bonus applies. That's when the value is over 20. When the value is over 20, that is the only time the resolution die roll is modified. Right? Otherwise, the die roll lays how it rolls, except when we have that parenthetical crit, then we add that to the die roll. But other than that, you're always adding to the stat. And then a stat below 0 or less, there's no negative values. The stat value is simply counted as a 0, and a roll of 20 counts as a fumble still. But you still have to roll. Failure is automatic, but the range of die roll indicates indicating a fumble increases by 1 point for every point below 0. Okay, so let me read that again. The range of die roll results that lead to a fumble increases by 1 point for every point below 0. So normally you only get a fumble when you roll 20, okay? But if you have a -3 modifier, all right, this would mean that it's sort of dragging that number line to the left. And so that means that 17, 18, 19, and 20 are all fumbles. And maybe I should read this just exactly as it is. Once again, a stat value may be temporarily reduced to 0 or less. Pendragon does not use negative values, even if a modifier would reduce the value to a negative number. Instead, the stat value is simply counted as 0, and as usual, a roll of 20 counts as a fumble. In such circumstances, the character must still roll. Failure is automatic. However, the range of die roll results indicating a fumble increases by 1 point for every point below 0. For example, a character with a dancing skill of 3 receives a -5 modifier. So mathematically, the total value of that stat would be a -2. Effectively, it's a 0. However, what that does is you take however much that -2 is, the absolute value of that, that is how many additional numerals or integers are now fumbles. So usually only the 20 is a fumble, but because you're 2 below 0, this would probably be helpful to write on a number line. So the skill is 3 minus 5, and that equals -2. And we say, okay, well, you know what? My riding skill is now a -2, so I'm obviously going to fail, right? I can't roll under a -2. There's no negative dice. So I just failed. Let's move on. And we go, no. You still got to roll. And they say, why? I mean, even, I'm going to fail no matter what. And we say, yeah, but we got to see how badly you fail. Do you fail just regular, or do you have a fumble, a crit fail? And they say, oh, okay, that's right. Like, so if I roll a 20, that would mean I got a crit fail. And you say, well, no, because you're -2, we're still counting the skill as 0. However, it's going to drag the fumble range 2 spots to the left. And so now you can get a fumble 20 minus 2. You can get it for 18, 19, and 20. Okay. And then let's just talk experience. So we talked about the reasons for getting experience. And this check, I said that at the session, it actually happens during the winter phase to see if we learned anything. Experience checks are not automatic. Whenever a roll is successful, the ability to award or deny experience is one of the key powers of the game master. Now me, when we roll a crit success, we get a check. If we roll a crit failure, we get a check. If we achieve success under significant circumstances, we get a check. And I keep saying crit failure, but it's called a fumble. Game master may also grant checks in response to player actions. And the game master may sometimes tell the player to check one of their traits or passions without having made a roll. So it's like, go ahead and roll treachery. Is that even one of them? That can't be one of them. Go ahead and roll suspicious, deceitful. And they just decide to give that check because it's like, some choice they made narratively really embodied that characteristic of the player. My camera is slowing down a bit, so I'm going to try to close some applications. All right, I figured it out. Let me know if you heard this one before. My Steam program just started up on its own, and it decided, hey, you know what? I'm just going to kind of turn on in the background and eat up half your RAM. All right, so let's talk about characteristics. 5 characteristics quantify every character's physical qualities. These are not the traits. These are, characteristics, but we call them stats or attributes, right? Size, 14 for this character. Who is this? Dame Tamura. Measures a character's relative height and weight compared to others. It's also the threshold value for the derived characteristic called knockdown. And I think that's the level that you have to go under to get knocked down in combat. Dex measures a character's agility. Dex keeps a character upright or horsed, and when there is a possibility of knockdown in combat. So you must have to roll dexterity to do a check on it. We'd call it in another game or a test. Strength measures a character's physical power and their ability to exert force or pressure. Strength helps determine the derived characteristics of weapon damage. A number of 6-sided dice equal to strength plus size divided by 6. And we always round up. And brawling damage, a flat number equal to strength plus size divided by 6. As well as movement rate equal to strength plus dex divided by 2 plus 5. All right. Let me try to write that down just from memory. Not even going to look at it. This is how I know I got it. All right. So we'll say that size. We have size, and then we have dex. Those, I think, are pure. And then we have damage is going to be strength plus size, and that one is going to be, it's going to be D strength plus size, because it's like, so if your strength plus size is 4, you roll 4d6. So it's actually strength plus size d6. Okay. And then the next one was brawling. And that one is just strength plus size. It's not dice roll. And the last one was speed, movement. And that one was strength plus dex divided by 5 plus 2. No, divided by 2 plus 5. So let me just try to compute that here. So that would be 14 of strength, 12 dex. So that would be 26 divided by 2 equals 13 plus 5. Their movement would be 18. Let's see if I got it right. Got it. Cool. Constitution measures health and vitality. Constitution's important in determining how much of a beating you can take and how quickly you recover. The derived characteristic called major wound is equal to, sounds like the sequel to Major Pain. Remember Major Pain? Is equal to your constitution value. Your total hit points are constitution plus size, and your unconscious value is equal to total hit points divided by 4. And I remember from the practice thing that unconscious, I think it's like functions a little like morale, maybe, but instead of running away, I just get knocked out. Lastly, your healing rate is equal to your constitution value divided by 5. So that's going to be pretty low. Let's see what we have here. Constitution 15. Okay, so that'd be 3. But say it was 14. Constitution 5 divided by 14. That would be 2 times 5, 10, 4, 0, 5 into 40. So that'd be 2.8. And then we always round that up to 3. And then apparently APP in this stands now for appeal. It used to be appearance, but it includes things like charisma, charm, just like the impression you leave on other people. Characteristics have many uses in the game of Pendragon. Most often, these uses are subtle or not immediately obvious. However, from time to time, characters may need to test their raw abilities. For this purpose, they roll against an appropriate characteristic. In general, characteristic rolls are simple resolutions with no additional effects. So I guess like maybe you could do one with size. I don't know if I'm stretching here, but I'd be like, there's like a little hole in the wall. You need to see if you can get through it with a size of 14. I roll a 5. I'm able to get through it. What would a crit look like? A crit success? Would it be like, you perfectly fit through it? You're like Wile E. Coyote running through like your gap in the wall. Oh, this is pretty cool. Appeal measures the character's natural charm, presence, and physical attractiveness. As such, it often provokes deep responses in people, automatic and outside their conscious awareness. So basically like John Hamm in 30 Rock with the beautiful person halo, I think they call it, or aura. All right. Characteristic roles sometimes include a modifier, most often due to environmental factors. Okay. The glory roll. And I think we'll get through this here and then we'll, I think this would be a good place to stop because we'd be chapter 3, traits and passions. I didn't mind doing this video, but I think just in the interest of like getting a move on, I'm going to read through those and then I'm going to make some bullet points about what I want to report off. But again, I notice that when I start going through this stuff, I feel like a responsibility to teach it, and that's not really good because I don't know it super well yet. I'm learning it. It helps me to learn it by teaching it, but I get caught up in that sometimes, and I'm like, oh, I've got to go through everything, and that's not the point. Like, I can go through stuff in my own time and things like that. I'm not trying to be selfish about it, but like that's why I want people to play along with me so we can learn it together. Okay, the glory roll. At time the game master may ask the player knights to make a glory roll. This is a roll against the character's glory divided by 1,000, rounding to the nearest whole number. For example, if a character has 3,755 glory, they must roll 4 or less. 3.775. Okay, rounded up to 4 to succeed. It is possible to have 2 knights make an opposed glory roll to... This is so cool. I'm like really, really excited about this. And what I'm excited about is there's so many different things that can modify a person's glory. And this is just something that from a solo play perspective, it's going to make me feel like I'm constantly cultivating, having my glory change, and then being able to roll on that. Sorry, I'm like sniffling a lot. I think I'm getting a cold. I think I got a cold mid-video. To resolve a minor social impasse. So we'll be like, okay, this person has more glory, a little bit more than this guy, but this guy's having a great night. He looks great. Let's roll these glory rolls. Movement and actions are abstracted for the purposes of quick resolution and simplicity. Different situations call for different approaches to the question of movement and speed in the game. The game master must be ready to settle specific situations, often by calling for opposed movement rolls. The average movement rate for humans is 16, or 1.6 yards per second, or 3.2 miles an hour. For some combat actions, the movement rate value is used in an opposed resolution roll against an opponent's action. Oh, I see. So you're going to be like, roll your movement versus his movement to see which of you like gets to wherever X marks the spot, the point of clash or whatever. This is also interesting for soloist. Pendragon allows players to control and command minor characters in their entourage. Rich knights may command entire households of background characters and supporters, but all save the poorest of knights have one follower in common, their trusty squire. This is like their caddy. Part of a knight's duty is to train young nobles in skills at arms, courtesy, and other domains of knowledge necessary to bear the title of knight. Squires graduate from the rank of page around 14 and enter into a knight's service. Squires graduate from the rank of page around the age of 14 and enter into a knight's service. The squire skill. Player knights may call upon their own squire to make a squire roll for normal servant-type activities, making camp, tending horses, cleaning armor, and for combat-related duties. In combat, for instance, a squire roll is used to use the call squire action. This is literally the last sentence, but I'm so curious that I have to go check it out. Because, again, anytime that I can sort of pick up the camera and move it with another character for a little while, that's going to be very useful for solo play. So if I can do like a little bit of a, okay, meanwhile, this is what the squire was doing. Squire skill roll. The squire acts and proceeds with the desired action this round. Success, the squire acts and proceeds with the desired action next round. I see. Okay, critical is this round. Success, next round. Fail, the squire does not act and the character may call again next round. Fumble, whether due to indolence or cowardice, the squire is nowhere to be seen. They may appear again later. Okay. That's good news. We're getting there, folks. So I'm going to go through, I think we've talked about traits and passions quite a bit. I'm sorry if that explanation of the roles, I really felt motivated to teach that in a really simple way, but I don't know if I achieved that. So I hope it was helpful and in some way to somebody. And if it wasn't, pick this up. It's $30. It would be cool if more people did this along with me. So, but yeah, otherwise, we'll probably do, we'll probably finish this book before I start like alternating out to the member only videos. So don't feel that I'm abandoning you yet if you're not able to be a member, but I am approaching, as of the time of this video, I have 97 members. I am so unbelievably I can't believe it. So I mean, that's great. And so if you want to be a part of the blessed 100, I would love to have you along for this ride, and I promise that I'm going to keep putting in good effort in this and keep trying my best. Otherwise, thanks for coming along as I developed a rhinovirus mid-video. I hope you fare better this week. Bye-bye. Gosh, I need to blow my nose so bad. I'm not going to do that. Oh, I did it. I'm sorry.